Imagine being on a plane, laughing with friends, excited for the trip ahead, only to realize, within hours, you'll be fighting for your life in the deadliest mountains on Earth. You're watching Rivo TV. Let me take you back to October 12, 1972. A small chartered plane took off from Montevideo, Uruguay, carrying 45 people, mostly young rugby players, along with their families and friends. The mood on board was light, filled with laughter, stories, and the excitement of a trip to Santiago, Chile. None of them could imagine that within hours, their lives would be turned upside down in one of the most extraordinary survival stories ever told. Normally, this flight takes just a few hours. But the route cut straight across the mighty Andes Mountains, a wall of jagged peaks stretching the length of South America. The Andes are the longest mountain range in the world, and only the Himalayas rise higher. These mountains are beautiful, but they are also merciless. And on that day, they would become a death trap. Bad weather forced the pilots to make an unscheduled stop in Mendoza, Argentina, to wait out the storm. They spent the night there, hopeful that the skies would clear by morning. On October 13, at 2:18 in the afternoon, the aircraft climbed back into the air. For nearly an hour, the flight was smooth. Passengers relaxed, chatting about the rugby matches ahead, passing around snacks, joking with each other. But just after 3:20 p.m., as the plane began its descent towards Santiago, everything changed. The aircraft was still surrounded by mountains, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. Clouds thickened, turbulence shook the plane violently, and alarms began to blare in the cockpit. The rugby players, strong and fearless, laughed it off as just another bump in the road. But one glance out the window erased all the smiles. Through a break in the clouds, a wall of rock appeared, closer than anyone could believe. The pilots reacted instantly, pulling back hard on the controls, engines roaring at full power as they tried to climb. But it was too late. The tail slammed against the mountainside and tore away, taking rows of seats and screaming passengers with it. Seconds later, the left wing clipped another ridge and sheared off, sending more people plummeting into the abyss. What remained of the fuselage shot forward before slamming into a glacier, skidding 700 meters downhill at nearly 220 miles per hour before grinding to a stop. The cockpit was crushed, the pilots killed instantly. The aircraft was torn open, its interior shredded. But against all odds, 33 people were still alive. Injured, bleeding, shocked, but alive. At over 11,000 feet, surrounded by nothing but snow and ice, their nightmare was just beginning. The plane had strayed almost 50 miles off its planned route. No one knew where they were. Rescue planes began searching, but spotting a broken fuselage painted white against endless snow was nearly impossible. Among the survivors were two young medical students, Roberto Canessa and Gustavo Zerbino. They moved quickly from body to body, trying to save whoever they could. One of their teammates, 23-year-old Nando Paradu, was in a coma from a head injury. They didn't give up on him. That first night, as temperatures plunged to -30 degrees, 5 of the most badly injured succumbed to their wounds. The others huddled together inside the wreckage, blocking the open end of the fuselage with luggage and scraps to try to keep the cold out. The next day, rescue planes flew directly overhead. The survivors shouted, waved, and tried to signal with anything they could, lipstick letters scrawled on the fuselage, suitcases arranged in a cross on the snow. 3 aircraft flew right over them. None saw a thing. Days passed. Hope began to fade. Hunger clawed at their stomachs. Ingeniously, one survivor, Fido Strauch, used a piece of metal as a solar collector to melt snow for drinking water, storing it in empty bottles. Seat cushions became snowshoes. Every day was a battle just to see another sunrise. 8 days after the crash, against all odds, Nando Paradu woke from his coma. He quickly learned that his mother had died in the crash, and his sister was fatally injured. He did everything he could to keep her alive, but within days, she too passed away. By October 21, more than a week after the crash, search efforts were officially called off. Authorities concluded there was no way anyone could have survived that long in such brutal conditions. For the survivors, the crushing news came through a small transistor radio they had salvaged from the wreckage. One of the players managed to fix it with a makeshift antenna, and late at night they huddled around it, praying for good news. Instead, they heard their worst fear: the search had ended. Many broke down in tears. Some prayed. Others stared in silence, numb with despair. Food had already run out. They had rationed chocolate bars, nuts, dried fruit, even wine. One chocolate peanut stretched across 3 days. Now there was nothing left. Some tried eating leather from the seats. It only made them sick. It was then that they faced the most horrifying choice of their lives. Surrounded by the frozen bodies of friends and family, they realized the only way to survive was to eat the flesh of the dead. At first, many refused. The very thought was unbearable. But as days dragged on, one by one, starving and weak, they gave in. Just when survival seemed impossible, disaster struck again. On the 17th night, an avalanche roared down the mountain, burying the fuselage in snow and trapping the survivors inside. 8 more were suffocated in the icy darkness. Only 19 remained. For 3 days, they clawed their way through packed snow, gasping for air, desperate to reach the surface. When they finally emerged, they were more determined than ever. No one was coming. If they wanted to live, they would have to save themselves. Strongest among them, Paradu, Kanessa, and another teammate, Vizintin, made a pact. They would venture out across the mountains to find help. They stitched together scraps of clothing into a makeshift sleeping bag. Wearing layers of sweaters, jeans, and even plastic bags over their feet, they began their climb. The journey was brutal. Thin air left them gasping, blizzards blinded their path, and every step uphill cost them half a step back. They had no gear, no map, no compass. But they kept moving forward. After days of climbing, Vizintin turned back to conserve food. Paradu and Kanessa pressed on, determined to finish what they had started. When they reached the summit, what they saw nearly crushed their spirit. Mountains upon mountains, white peaks stretching endlessly in every direction. Not a single sign of life. Yet, on the horizon, they spotted 2 bare ridges without snow. That became their goal. For 9 relentless days, they trekked across valleys and rivers, surviving on scraps of meat they had carried with them. Finally, exhausted, starving, and near collapse, they stumbled into a valley where they saw cows grazing. Civilization had to be near. And then, across a roaring river, they saw him, a man on horseback. A Chilean farmer named Sergio Catalan. The river was too loud for words, so Sergio returned the next day with paper and pencil tied to a rock. Paradu scribbled a desperate message: "I come from a plane that crashed in the mountains. There are survivors. Please help us." Sergio raced on horseback for hours to alert authorities. The news spread quickly. The world was stunned. Survivors had been found from a crash nearly 3 months earlier. Helicopters were dispatched immediately. On December 22, 70 days after the crash, 16 survivors were airlifted out of the Andes. They were skeletal, frostbitten, dehydrated, but alive. Against every possible odd, they had endured. The miracle of the Andes became a story for the ages, a reminder of what human beings can do when driven by sheer will to live. It's a story of pain, of sacrifice, of unimaginable choices, but above all, of hope. As the saying goes, where there's a will, there's a way. And these 16 souls proved that nothing, not even the Andes themselves, could break the human spirit. This is Rivo TV, and if you've made it this far, thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most incredible survival stories ever told. I've covered many more mysteries and forgotten disasters like this one, so if you'd like to keep exploring with me, stay curious, keep watching, and I'll see you in the next video.